So just going to reconvene where we left off. If we can, there we go, bringing up the resolution that's been moved by Councillor Hill, seconded by Councillor Dalton. Also, I'm sure I don't have to remind members not to use the chat for commentary. Deputy Mayor Cashmore, you know better than that. Just for indicating whether you would like to comment. I've got a speaking order there from Suad, so I will be going with that order. But please put in chat, and I'll be finishing off with Councillor Hills will actually be closing the debate. So let me just see. Apologies, Deputy Mayor. You've got no, I don't know what the standing orders say for being able to make your comments from the chat if you haven't got a mic. But we can, perhaps if there's something that you would like to have read out, we can arrange that. But I'll let the team figure out that one out, how best to help you contribute. Right, if we are all back, of course I can't see you, so I'm just hoping you're there. I will now ask Councillor Bartley to lead us off with the debate. Kia ora, Josephine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not really debating. I'm just, my comment is that I definitely support this. I'm really glad to be part of the TERP. I feel I bring some reality to the ideology that's being aspired to. And I just want it to work for everybody. But my comments really are to reiterate what myself and Councillor Dalton keep saying in the TERP working group, is to work with our communities. And I do not mean the same stakeholders that are always approached when it comes to cycling and things like that. I don't mean Bike Auckland, I mean going to communities and learning from the vaccination rollout that even Todd Nile talks about, is the lessons that we've learned from the vaccination rollout is give it over to communities. When it's community led, you will get that behaviour change. Look at all the behaviour change that was achieved in getting people vaccinated and getting the vaccination rate lifted when you gave it over to communities. So we need to adopt the same approach with this big, massive challenge of climate action and the challenge of trying to change people's behaviour into getting out of their cars and trying a different kind of mode. So trying to achieve that mode shift and mode balance. We're well aware of the scale of the work because of the experiences that we've had with innovating streets. So we know it's going to be hard, but we know we need to work together with our communities. So yeah, and it needs to be right from the get-go as opposed to asking our communities to deliver spin. So lots and lots of issues going on there. Even the research that we come up with, we need to kind of challenge that research because it seems like it's based on assumptions sometimes regarding low-income households and why people don't buy EVs. It's not very easy to buy an EV, to be honest. Yeah, so that's all I wanted to say. But try to be positive. I reckon we can achieve it. And I look at the vaccinations and what Pacific communities asked me for in terms of incentives was hop cards. That tells me a lot. So yeah, public transport, I think we've got lots of opportunities to really make some difference here, to make that transformational change. We just have to be open about how we do this. Thank you.
Kia ora, tō toko your whakaaro. Thank you, Councillor Bartley. The next comment is Councillor Watson. Kia ora, John.
Okay, thanks very much. I'd just like to say at the outset that I found this report not just detailed but very compelling readings. Certainly the most comprehensive report I've seen on this, since I've been in council. It spells out very clearly the transformation that's required, but just as importantly, the variety of approaches that are going to be required to meet it. Not everyone's the same. There's different responses that are going to work in different parts of Auckland. And in that respect, I just want to pick up on one of the comments that was made in the report about Auckland Transport's research, which indicated that more than half of all Aucklanders perceive that public transport does not go where they need to go, where there is actually a clear sense that, in actual fact, they don't know already what's currently on offer, and that their perceptions are, in many instances, would appear to be based on, conceivably 5-6 years ago, or certainly before the new network was rolled out. So that's the reality on the ground, and it's absolutely fundamental that we pick up on that research, that we have significant parts of our population who are unaware of the opportunities that exist currently, far less anything that might be available in the future. So I'm really interested in the line that Councillor Walker signalled there, and that's what can be done on the here and now, because certainly since I've been in council, there's been a massive investment in transport generally. We know that every single annual plan and long-term plan is, the lion's share of our budget goes to transport, and a significant part of that has been public transport. And it's been added to. We had an interim transport levy back around 2015. Every ratepayer paid over $300 for that initiative of the Deputy Mayor. We've had a regional fuel tax. We're contemplating a climate targeted rate. And if we look east, west, north and south around Auckland, despite my concern that a number of projects have blown out, there's actually a lot to show. If you look at Auckland as a whole, currently as we stand, there's a lot of public transport options in different parts. Some parts, the inner city parts, are far better served than the outer parts. We know that. That's a reality. But even within those outer suburbs, the investment in some of the very modern and multifaceted bus stations is a bit of a misnomer, and the train networks down south and out west. That's impressive. If you travel around, or took a day to travel around Auckland on ferries, trains and buses, you couldn't but be impressed by how far Auckland has come in the last decade. So that's currently available, and a lot more people could be making use of those facilities if indeed they are given that prompt by virtue of a call to action, and that hasn't happened. So people have drawn analogy with the vaccine, and I think that's a good analogy there. There'll be the willing and able people who climate change is a serious issue to them, and who are ready to act now, are looking for some sort of lead. They're not being appealed to, so they could be doing a whole lot of things now. If it's about vehicle kilometres travelled, everyone could be getting challenged to reduce their vehicle kilometres travelled currently. It might be you to start off with. You use public transport 1 day a week, 2 days a week. You don't go into work if you can avoid it. You don't do those little trips to the dairy or the local shops. You try a walk or you try a cycle. So that personalisation of the climate change challenge, that should be occurring now, and it should be coming from our government, but our council should be chipping in on that, or we should be taking responsibility for Auckland. When I go to the government's role, and I noticed one of the parts of the paper there was about the possibility of cheaper fares or conceivably even no-cost public transport. I compare where we are to other places around the world, and it wasn't mentioned in the studies, but if you talk like cities with Vienna, they have a 365 days of mobility pass. So for €1 a day, that's 365 euros during the year. You can travel as often as you want on the underground, trams, buses, trains, and that includes suburban trains. Interestingly, with their offering, and I heard Councillor Bartley talk about the hop card and requests from people at out around her ward. In Vienna, companies can buy that annual season ticket for their employees and offset that ticket against their tax return. So that's the sort of response we're certainly looking for at the national level. And if you're going to try that, what better place than to do it in your biggest city, where your biggest public transport offering currently exists. So I think as much as we've outlined what we'd like to do, we have to be a little more active, I think, in prompting the government. Certainly, they've been preoccupied with bigger things over the last couple of years with COVID, but that's not really an excuse. That notion of urgency that came through so strongly in the report has to be built on, and it doesn't have to always be predicated on waiting to this next massive budget or to this policy's completed. When I look at the area that's closest to me, Gulf Harbour Town Centre, there is a ferry service, there is a bus service, there's not much in the way of linkages, but if people really wanted to access that ferry service by walking or cycling, there's a rough track there that all it needs is actually a bit of loose chip, and that's served people for accessing the bus station and conceivably the ferry service if they want to ride. It doesn't need the whole 10 yards of going through 10 years of planning and then a concrete path. There's interim solutions, low-cost solutions that make use of the existing facilities. And it always amuses me when we talk about increasing walking and cycling options. Most places, except places like Herald Island, Whanuapai, have footpaths on, in most instances, both sides of the road. In Japan, they put a little line down the middle. One side is pedestrians, one side is cyclists. There's your cycle lane. And that's in a far more intensive populations than we've got here. So I'd like to see a little bit more innovation. I'd like to see us using a lot more of what we've got now. And most importantly, I'd like to see us making a pitch to the ready and the able to be doing it now to reduce their vehicle kilometres travelled, to use the existing facilities that have had hundreds and hundreds, if not billions of dollars invested in them, until waiting to some nirvana when everything suddenly drops into place. A lot of the stuff that could be happening should be happening right now. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor. You were fortunate there that, well, it was good to hear from you. And for members, there will be going forward, a bell at 4 minutes, just so that you know the time and to wrap up at 5. But I think you just snuck in there. So thank you, Councillor Watson. Appreciated. Councillor Sayers, kia ora. Councillor Sayers, next for your korero. Okay, we might keep moving. Councillor Henderson, kia ora, are you ready for your korero?
Yeah, why not? Thanks, Chair. Yeah, look, I know it's been a long meeting and a long item, so I'll just try and be as brief as I can. I really do support this work. I think it's really fantastic stuff. It represents a really big step change to where we've even been in the past, and acknowledging Councillor Watson's really good points around how we've travelled. I mean, any kid in the 90s, as I was, would tell you how horrible our public transport system was in those days. So, the super city is not particularly popular around a lot of my neck of the woods, but I always point out that actually a lot of the transport system, and particularly public transport, has come a long way. The bit of caution that I wanted to add was that the level of trust in many communities at the moment is very low, and obviously there's COVID anxieties and a bunch of stuff around that. But, changing things like things in a wholesale way will mean we're going to need to bring people along with us to make real change, and change that actually will last and be enduring. And that's the kind of change that we need for addressing our serious climate issues. Just one of my favourite stats here is going by Auckland Transport's definitions. The number of frequent bus services in various parts of the city. Central Auckland has 15, South Auckland has 7, North Shore has 6, East Auckland has 2, West Auckland has 1. We are asking people in suburbs to make potentially huge life changes without, at the moment, the structures to support that. And that is why I've been repeatedly a voice around this table saying, look, the congestion question is fine and we are progressing it, but it needs to progress at the right pace. We can't do this tomorrow because people will be left behind in droves. To get to the place where we need to be, I've always said we need 4 things. We need more routes where people have them. We need new routes where we don't, and that's plenty of places in Auckland still. The cost of public transport is high by international standards and going up all the time. And finally, workers' conditions in our bus drivers also need addressing, and I note that we have a shortage again in this situation. And through it all, we've built a city over the decades with employment nodes all around it, but you can't get from one to the other. So try getting from Henderson to Manukau or Takapuna to Manukau. It's very, very hard. And so we have a system where we're funneling everyone into the central city, but it's very hard to traverse your own area within public transport in many places. So, there's some of the challenges that we're looking at. And I'm really glad that the TERP is looking at these kind of things. And I'd say, look, more strength to you guys for it. And just keep going. Well done. Thanks, Chair.
Kia ora, councillor. You should have tried getting to netball in the 80s. I can tell you that was something by bus. If I ake nei, and Mayor Goff. Kia ora, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, kia ora, Madam Chair. Look, the message from this report couldn't be clearer, could it? To head off disaster, we need transformational change, and we need it now. We've got less than 100 months to achieve the objective of a 64% reduction in transport emissions. And what this group and the next report is telling us, we're not even remotely tracking online to achieve that objective. But the officials are telling us, they're reassuring us, this is doable. It's doable, 1, if we have the will, and 2, if we're prepared to pull all the levers that we need to achieve that outcome. Now, I just want to dismiss that we can do it. We can do it with less money. The regional fuel tax, we've heard, is already committed, and it runs out 3 years after any congestion charge would come into effect. The congestion charge ain't going to happen before 2025. That's what we've heard today from officers. And when it does happen, it will start small, probably only about $11 million in the first year for the centre city cordon that they'll put in place. And it may take 10 years to run out to get in excess of $120 million. It's going to be important. It's demand management. It will help raise some revenue. But we are going to need something like a climate action targeted rate. I mean, that's $60 million a year, but with matching government funds for the transport component of that, it'll be $100 million. And will the government match it? Of course they will, because the critical objective in the National Policy Statement on Transport and the next Auckland Transport Alignment Project will be around reducing emissions. So we've got to do it. We've got to bite the bullet. I've read the ACT statement saying yesterday this is an unbelievable burden on ratepayers, $1.10 a week on the medium valued home at 1.1 million. And the Ratepayers Alliance is saying the same thing. So effectively they're saying do nothing, and we've heard from officers too, if we do nothing, the cost within a couple of decades will be twice as much as the cost of doing something, and we won't, if we do nothing, we won't have headed off the disaster, economic disaster, environmental disaster. Look, we've really got to do this, and I'm confident that we've got the courage to follow what officers are saying in this report, but also the courage to fund it. Because if we don't fund it, the words are empty. And just remember what I said yesterday, history won't remember what we thought about these issues and how terrible it all was, but they will remember what we did about it. Let's do something about it. Thank you.
Kia ora, Mr. Mayor. I will go back to see if Councillor Sayers has managed to come back to make his comment. Kia ora, Greg, are you with us?
I am, Madam Chair, but I haven't got a break. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. And I'm pretty sure that the Deputy Mayor can't join with his mic, so I'm presuming that you're happy for us to skip you, Deputy Mayor. So I'll take the next comment from Councillor Walker. Kia ora, Wayne.
Madam Chair, I just really want to speak and emphasise the absolute necessity for behavioural change. I would suggest that many of the things that we need in terms of capacity, we actually already have. And I'd repeat that, we already have. We've got oodles of capacity, but people just aren't doing it. And in order to get people to do stuff, you need to have leadership and vision and provide people with incentives and so on. To the now, the Auckland Transport website, and I'd suggest to councillors in Auckland Transport that you have a look at that website and see if there's anything that jumps out at you around behavioural change that actually speaks directly to it, other than something that's just an offering. So what do we need to do in terms of trials? What do we need to do in terms of collaboration, listening to people that have put up suggestions, many of which are very, very cheap and could be implemented now. I've been to eco-mobility festivals and strategies in other cities, participated in trials, helped kick off a bike day in Auckland back in the 70s without scarcely any money at all. There's untold things that we could be doing right now to effect radical, fast change if we want to, but I'd suggest it's going to require a seismic shift in how we're actually doing things, and that's my real concern. We can talk about all of this, but if the structures that we need are really not there in terms of the step change, it's going to be very, very hard to make it happen. So that's the very real challenge I put forward, Madam Chair. If we've got a whole lot of stuff that's underutilised now, what are we not doing to effect that change, both ourselves as Auckland Council and government? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. If I can Councillor Collins, talofa.
Talofa, Chair. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I won't be long. I've been ruminating, though, on point 71, which is, there were a few points that stuck out, but I thought I'd share point 71, reshare it with people, because I know you've all read the report. The need to ensure a just transition and address current inequities of the transport system is a common theme, so it's been discussed by the team, and deliberative democracy and more participatory decision-making have been suggested as a way to reflect the views of Auckland's diverse communities. I think for me that's what's held my attention quite a bit in the discussion and from the paper, because the groups that are often that feel left out and sometimes disqualified from participation have been the groups that have been noted in the report: Māori, Pacific, the rainbow communities, low-income communities. And I think this is a real opportunity for us to reach the most affected communities who've had such long-term inequitable outcomes when it's come to public transport and reliance on gas guzzlers, to make part of that shift for themselves. And I'm driven also by the fact that good, better urban design is going to result in better health outcomes. There's research that's out there at the moment by Pacific academics in urban design who have talked about the fact that where the change in the way we design has to be such that it allows families to walk, to use active modes of transport, because that has great health benefits for them. So this does a whole lot for us. I'm really impressed by the report, and I think those who put it together, the officers, those who added their bits in, who've been part of the working group to give their advice. But I think this is an exciting report. I still wonder though where our government, and this might not be completely well related, but where the government is subsidising, and if we're to go by the facts that more wealthier communities have more cars and drive more than poorer communities, I can't understand why we are subsidising the purchase of EVs that might happen in the next 10, 20 years, when we know that poor, low-income families can't afford EVs. They can definitely afford a cheap fare on a bus, or if we made it free, and we're going to see some of that start to happen for low-income families next July. So I think this is a great report. This is our opportunity to really change things, take a real step change, so that families can feel safe on the bus, can be able to get the routes that they need, get to the destinations they need to go to, because we know that there are parts in the area that just don't have a bus reaching those areas. So we've got to do better, and I'm hopeful that this gives us a real pathway forward to address the inequities and make it a much fairer system for all, and achieve our climate desires for a planet that lasts, a planet that's going to outlive us. And we've got to make sure we're doing our bit too. And some of you would have seen my tweet. I had my daughter sitting on my lap during this discussion, and I think that's been my reminder that it's for her generation and beyond that we're doing this for. So thanks to everyone involved, and I look forward to the way this is really going to reset and adjust what has been inequitable for such a long time. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor. Apologies, Councillor Dalton, that you were overlooked on the speaking order, so I'd like to take you next.
That's no problem. I'll be quick because everyone will be hungry. It's really been great being part of the TURG. I really enjoy this work, and I think that it's evidence of how great collaboration between governors can be. And Abby has just had so much passion. It's been really, really good working alongside you on this. I would like to thank Auckland Transport and all of the officers who landed such collaborative recommendations. And it shows that this is a shared partnership and that we're both taking responsibility and we're both on the same journey. And of course, I support all of the recommendations that are there today. I think a couple of things that I have learnt so far. Well, one thing, and other people have spoken about it, and when we talk about inequity, the transport recommendations that are in the climate action targeted rate have come from, in part, the work that's been done on the TURG, and it is great. And if I just talk specifically to my area, we get a bus in the western side of Manurewa that has not been on the arterials before. But to really, really hone in on where the missing links are, it goes to exactly what other councillors have said, and that is talking to the people who we would like to catch the buses instead of hopping in their cars. And that means understanding them and their lifestyles. And the report that the Ministry of Transport released, the Equity in Public Transport, gave a really good steer on that. A document that's just out, funded by the Helen Clark Foundation, The Fair Path, written by Holly Walker, another good document that takes us to who we need to be talking to when we're going out and saying, what is it that you need to be able to change your mode of transport? An interesting book that was recommended by Julie Ferry, The Invisible Woman, really had me intrigued around exposing data bias in a world designed by men. That took me on a whole nother pathway. And so I can see the value, especially Josephine, Councillor Bartley mentioned it, the community-led vaccination program, and how we reach people that we just don't see otherwise. These are the missing links. Everything else, I believe, can be achieved a lot more easily for those who have the wherewithal. And Michael Roth's presentation was excellent at that. In fact, it was so good, I listened to it twice. I tapped into his presentation when he did it to the local boards. They evidence exactly who is using the small car the most. And it's not people in Joe's or Efeso's or my community. So we're getting better at understanding the demographics, which will make us better at providing the responses. So I'm really happy to be part of this group and looking forward to what we need to do. I agree with Efeso. increased investment from central government is going to be necessary, because we can't fund our way through this. We can't continue to just fund our way through this through the ratepayers. Although I appreciate the CATR is going to deliver some important moves for us should it go through. So thank you for the opportunity, Chair, to say my bit.
Ngā mihi. Kia ora, Councillor Dalton. As Chair, I've tried very, very hard to not give a response to everybody's comments, because they've all been really fantastic. And I just wonder, before I hand over to Councillor Hills, who will wrap us up, and I think I'm right that there's no one else on the list for comments, I would just like to take this opportunity to make a penultimate comment very quickly, just so that I can throw in a few acknowledgements, and also just to add to the comments that were made, just about the immense size of the challenge. And when you see it there, that it's only 100 months until we get to 2030, it really hits home that this is going to require really seismic change to way that we travel, and land use planning, and how everything comes together. And I guess one part of it that's missing for me is that business as usual. There's so much that continues business as usual, and it's great to see the TURG group challenging that, because I just think there's such a big bit of work there, where we look at the projects that are underway, we look at projects that were planned on modelling that is no longer fit for purpose and doesn't put us on that pathway. And I know you touched on that, Abby, about how we have to really push those early insights and put different modelling into the machine so we come out with different solutions. I just wanted to also add my thanks just around the collaboration. I have been an alternate on the TURG, looking at the TURP, and have just wanted to listen as part of that group. And everybody, all the members of the group, just bring such a different perspective. As Councillor Dalton there mentioned, she's on her own learning and understanding and bringing all of that into the group, and Councillor Bartley's with a very different perspective and so many good observations about her on the front line of the vaccination campaigns and how we can just do things differently if we work with communities. So it's really, I'm really heartened to hear everybody having that focus on equity and the just transition, and just how we have to make that really front and centre as well. So I do just want to thank all the members of the TURG, and of course the huge team that have bringing this bit of work together, from Auckland Transport, from Auckland Council, many of you who are here today at the meeting. A massive ngā mihi kia koutou. Thank you for bringing this in front of us and making it so engaging and informative, that you've got members really engaged. I just love making evidence-based decision making, and this is what brings us up to that level, when we've just got this material in front of us in a way that is really easy to digest, and we can understand it, and makes us challenge our preconceived assumptions and put those to one side and really chew through the evidence. And just want to final shout out to the Mayor, who is really championing our climate action going into this budget, and it was good that he used his time for comments to put another plug in there for the climate action targeted rate. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for all your work in making this upcoming budget, climate action, a real focus of that budget. So I know that we have gone on longer than, well, we always go on longer than we think, but I just think that this is what we're here for. This is what democracy is about, that we use this time to bring these important issues into a public meeting and go through the material and really share our deliberations with the public. It's really important that we do that, so I do really appreciate the comments from everyone. So on that note, I think that's a really good place for me to hand over for a final comment from the mover. Councillor Hills. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Chair, and thank you so much. And thanks to the team for working on this, both Auckland Council and Auckland Transport working together. And just quickly, I don't think there was anything in the cancellation of that meeting that was on purpose or to divide anyone or upset anyone. And I had some good conversations with Adrian, and we had a Zoom call on Monday, and all is well, and she was pretty happy with the way forward, and the team, Auckland Council team, and have done an amazing job on this report. We'll just have to continue to make sure that the busyness and the fact that we are our staff teams, both in the sustainability office and transport team, are very small and doing a whole lot more work than they were doing a couple of years ago, but are still far smaller than they were a couple of years ago. So I think just making sure those pressures can ensure we work together in a collaborative way, which I feel we have on this. I guess what this does is move us forward. It doesn't force anything on anyone. What this doesn't do is force people out of their cars. What this doesn't do is make people change, but it does show us the desperate measures we need to take as a city to provide options. It's pretty obvious when we do provide those options, and I guess we have to talk about pre-COVID because of the disappointing situation our patronage is sitting at, yet when we're all locked at home, obviously. But in the 10 years of the Super City pre-COVID, we had increased our patronage from about 55 million trips a year to well over 100 million trips a year, and that was because of the investment and the access to public transport for our residents. It wasn't because we forced them into public transport, it's because we made it available for them. If you look at since the Super Cities existed with the cycling, we had 800,000 trips a year, and now we're looking at about, I think it's 3.5 million trips a year, and that is because of the investment. If you look at the new network, so the North Shore new network, we saw a 40% increase in public transport patronage once we had that new network in place, which connected our communities easier, which took away in 2016 the transfer fee, which ensured the hop card was properly integrated with our buses and trains. In the Southern network, in the first year, we saw a 28% increase in patronage after the new network was implemented. That wasn't because we forced that 28% increase of people onto public transport. It's because we suddenly made it available for more people. If we want to flick, and I know we have been flicking between the climate action targeted rate, and that probably wasn't meant to happen, but that will ensure that 170,000 more Aucklanders have access to a frequent route. It will bring 79 improvements to routes, which means that over 1 million Aucklanders will be within 500 metres walking distance of those routes. We need to give people choice, because the other thing is, and what I keep getting concerned about, is we aren't looking at that arc. We aren't looking at what is coming. People are not going to be making petrol and diesel vehicles for New Zealand only. When the biggest markets are banning them in sort of 8 years' time, and if you think about, I've almost been on council nearly 6 years. That's not a long time if you think about it. If the biggest markets are banning petrol and diesel cars, those companies aren't going to be making cars just for us. And so we will need those electric vehicles coming here, and we will need those electric vehicles in a second-hand market and becoming cheaper for all families to access. But we also will have to make sure that we're providing public transport, walking and cycling options for people now. And as the TURG, sorry, not the turf, has shown is that the big focus we need to focus on is those well over 50% of all trips which are under 6 kilometres. And we know it's because people don't feel safe to walk or cycle around their communities, or maybe don't have access to a bus that's easy to get to. If we can close those gaps, and it is about what Councillor Watson was saying earlier, it's about, if you are driving to work every single day, if you could just catch the bus once a week as a starter, if you could if you could walk to school with your kids once a week, if you can, reduce that car down for a year and try it out, as some people are. If we have access to more housing around our urban centres, it might mean that you can walk down and get the bread and milk instead of having to drive to the dairy, which is miles away from your actual house. It's not about forcing people. It's not about ripping things out from under people. But if we don't provide these options and petrol doubles in price, if we have the carbon price going way up, which it's bound to be, and the air quality gets worse from carbon emissions, if we do nothing, then we won't be giving anyone options, and people will be forced to make decisions that they don't want to be, or have to walk a kilometre to the train station, which we don't want them to do. So I guess this is definitely a good start. I think around the renewals, that change, and I appreciate that Auckland Transport support that. That is around the questions we've been asking for many years, and it's not about, as Councillor Cooper rightly was concerned about, surprising people with a change on those renewals, but it's about how do we use those billions of dollars better when we roll out a rehab or a reseal, that we actually are able to grab some other budgets and maybe put a cycle lane in with consultation with the community, maybe put a pedestrian crossing in so people can get to the bus stop across the road safely if it's a 4-lane road, or maybe it's about adding transit lanes or bus stops when we're already digging up that road, because far too often people get annoyed when we spend millions upgrading a road and don't add those things and come back 3 years later to consult on adding them then. I think it's about ensuring that we have a policy that means we can use renewals once and add other budgets to them. So I just want to congratulate everyone. We have to move forward on this. We are running out of time. We don't want to go into the disasters, fires, floods and storms conversation too much, but I think it is important to note we have to do this for our city, we have to do this for the country, but also the world is expecting us to move too. We can't just be a fast follower. 100 cities our size make up 1/3 of global emissions. So if we all work together, we will be able to reduce emissions for the world, but we can't just hope others will do it. So big step forward. I'm really, really happy with this. And I think it's Tirangi from the Otara Bike Burbs who said her bike was a life and death for her. And she said for 2 reasons. One, it could be life and death if there isn't good infrastructure. But she said also getting food, getting out to see whānau and family, her bike was life or death. And that to me did bring it quite to the fore, because as Councillor Bartley and others say, we do often see Bike Auckland and others give a different vibe of the demographic that may be using bikes. But as Tirangi said, she said bikes are free to use, and I don't know why they're seen as something that is only for a certain class of people. So we've got to make sure we do this for everyone, but also acknowledge that different parts of our community are already using what we are providing, and they are using it. If we're not providing it anyway, we just need to make it safer and easier and hopefully cheaper with the government's help. Thank you. You're muted, Councillor.
Kia ora. Nā mihi ki a koe, Richard, for your whakaaro. As always, you are able to pull out all of those stats and figures. Amazing capacity for that. So that brings us to the end of the whakaaros. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm now going to ane te potene. I'm going to put the item. All those in favour? Aye.
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 To the contrary? No. Kua mana.
I just made a note
Sure.
there. Happy to support, except I'd just like my vote recorded against recommendation A only, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Sayers.
I wish to abstain on A, and the rest fine.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Right. Me hiki te hui, kia haere ai tātou ki te kai. I'm sure you're all looking forward to having a break, and we are going to break for half an hour for lunch. And Suad, if you could put it in just the chat to confirm the time that we will return to continue the agenda. So everybody, please have a good break and get some lunch. No one is to come back to the meeting hangry. We want everyone all well fed and ready to go at, what time does that mean we're going to be reconvening? In half an hour. So I just need to, if you could just put it in the chat, just to confirm that we are coming back at 2:10. Okay, thank you. See you soon. And thank you to those, to Abby and to Wayne who've joined us, and everybody who's now leaving us for this item. Appreciate your time at the meeting today. Ngā mihi.
Ngā mihi nui. Ka kite.
Mā te wā. Thank you.
Madam Chair.